Hey, thank you so much for watching, for listening, however you're absorbing our time together. Appreciate time with you. And of course, I want you to subscribe because this channel has amazing content, lots of fun interviews, and some cool things to think about as well. We're starting a new series, and this is really an important series. It's called Pausing with Purpose. Pausing with Purpose. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, to hustle and achieve, oftentimes we need to rest and reflect. And I say that because I remember when I was growing up, I had this example in my head. We had a babysitter. We had, various babysitters as I was growing up. And this one particular babysitter was probably a woman in her mid-20s. You're little, and so who knows? Your perspective is kind of just from the little person perspective. I remember this particular babysitter, she would run around like a chicken with her head cut off. I mean, she was like, bing, 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 like pinball, bing, 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 bing. And sometimes the activity, she was in perpetual motion and activity, but she didn't achieve very much. And some of the things she did achieve were not really what needed to be achieved, but she was just continually going. And she was just one frantic, frenzied ball of activity. And I remember even when I was little, I was like, I'd ask Mom, what is wrong with her? And my mom would be like, well, she did this. I recognize she did this and she should have done that. And so I think sometimes if we're not careful, we need to and we have to achieve, no doubt about it. But I think if we're not careful and we don't pause, we could achieve the wrong thing, something that's not helpful. And I think sometimes we try to achieve because we're not acknowledging something that's inside. And so sometimes the achievement can be a deflection or a distraction. But I want us to look at Jesus' life to consider the purpose and power of pause. So when you think about this, I want you to consider some of the times when Jesus paused, when he took some time away. And so the very, very first example I'd ask you to consider is in Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4. And it's an interesting pause because Jesus is probably in his late 20s, early 30s, and he's on the cusp of moving into his earthly ministry. So he's kind of concluding the carpenter work, so to speak, because we know he was, a carpenter. But before he goes into his earthly ministry, and this is after he gets water baptized, it says he goes into the wilderness. And actually it says that Holy Spirit led him into the wilderness where he was for 40 days. Some of those days, I don't know if it was all of it. I know he was tempted by Satan 3 times, but he was in the wilderness for 40 days. And I would say that this is a pause. Granted, he didn't eat. He was kind of fasted those 40 days. He was hungry afterwards or at the end of it. But there's a pause. And this was a very strategic, important pause because this pause was the springboard for his ministry, for the activity, for selecting disciples, for doing healing, for doing teaching, for, the life that he had in front of him the next couple of years that would be the culminate, obviously, in his death and resurrection. But he started that with a pause. He started it with 40 days. Well, I think that's a long time, actually. If you think about it, that's close to like a month and a half. A month and a half of pause. And it wasn't just because he was being lazy or, whatever. I think it was a preparation pause. A preparation pause so that when he began his ministry, he was fueled. He had already worked through temptations from the enemy, and he was secure in his identity. And I think that's really something very essential, a key pivot point for you to think about. I think a lot of times we have struggles in our identity, and because of those struggles and uncertainties, we might run around like a chicken with our head cut off. We don't know who we are. We don't know our purpose. We don't know where we're going, why we're doing. And so we're just going to stay busy and active and, looks like we're achieving a lot. Makes us feel important, But Jesus in that pause, and it was the questions, these were the questions that Satan, the enemy, asked Jesus, if you are the Son of God. So it's an identity pause, if you will, that sometimes in the pause, we can come to terms and have an appreciation, recognize. And I think in that pause, if we're attentive, Holy Spirit can speak to us and say, hey, this is who you are, as well as this is who you are not. Satan came to Jesus and tempted him. If you are the Son of God, then turn these stones into bread. I know you're hungry. You've been fasting for 40 days. You're hungry, so do your God thing. And I think Satan's always trying to get us distracted, always trying to question, trying to put it doubt, insecurity, instability, uncertainty. This is all the stuff that Satan does. But in the pause, when we take a pause, when we rest, when we settle down for a little bit, I think we can have some good conversation, communication, interaction with Holy Spirit to affirm identity. In Romans 8:16, it says, Holy Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are God's son, God's daughter. And I think sometimes we need a pause to have that reconfigured and reminded in our soul and our heart. Because I think sometimes when we get frenzied in the activities and busyness of the world and all the demands and responsibilities, sometimes we can forget, or some of that identity can get lost in the shuffle. And so I think it's very important for us to think about the pause. And as we finish up this little episode of the series, I want you to consider this. When God created the earth, He created it, we know, in 6 days, Genesis 1 and 2. At the end, the first time He separated land from water, dark from light, He did all these. And you watch the way God created. It was very sequential. God didn't make the fish before He had separated land and water, right? I mean, he was very line upon line and very logical in the sequence of what He did. And the final creation that He made is humanity. But it's interesting. I want you to think about this. On the 6 days of creation, God, the culminating final creation, man, when God created man on that 6th day, man's first day of existence was God's day of pause. And I think that's really important for you to consider, because God wasn't working and busy and distracted when man came into existence. In that pause, man is becoming aware, is alive, and God has paused, not necessarily to distract or whatever, to kind of rest, but I would propose that God paused so that He could have relationship, connection, and be present with and in humanity. So as you think about the power and the purpose of pause, I'm going to give you a couple things, key suggestions as we go through these episodes, suggestions to help you with a pause. This key suggestion, key to pause for this episode is put your phone down. You're like, yeah. No, not only put it down, but maybe you need to put it on silent, remove the vibrate, and maybe you need to put it in a different room, somewhere where it's not like this compulsive. I don't know about you, but sometimes it can be this compulsive. You pick it up, you just pick it up, and it's just like habitual. And that interruption, that can interrupt a pause. So put your phone down. I think that'd be very helpful for a pause. So thank you so much for subscribing. Of course, you want to hit the notification bell right there. You might want to send this series to your friends. Love to get your feedback, like, dislike, that'd be awesome. And here's a question for you to think about. And I'd like for you to ask this. How do you feel about a pause? How do you feel? Would you like it? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel like it's awkward? To be still is uncomfortable. How do you feel? How do you feel about a pause? And I like this joke. This is a really good joke. So as we finish, why did Adele, the singer Adele, why did she go to the other side of the road? so that she could say hello from the other side. You're like, kind of cheesy. I know. And you're like, Sarah, you got to get your words right better so you don't kind of sabotage your own joke. But you get the general idea of it. Next week's going to be a whole lot better.